Namaskaram everyone. Welcome to another podcast. Today we'll be discussing all things aerospace and XR. You might have heard from virtual cockpit experiences to groundbreaking simulations. We are about to uncover today how XR is transforming the aerospace industry, which is relatively very new, where XR is entering. So we'll discover how XR is breaking barriers in spacecraft design, pilot training, mission planning, and others. So for today, we have a very special guest, Timothy. He's working as an advisor at VOR Advisory, and there he's working on GTM strategy, hands-on pipeline expansion, operations. He has worked in sectors like aerospace, defense, augmented reality, and virtual reality. So welcome, Timothy.
Thank you for having me.
So it would be great if we first start with how your experience has been in this aerospace industry and how do you think XR is going to change this industry?
Well, I've had a long history in this space. I started out, 05, '06, building power walls in caves for aerospace, defense, and automotive industry throughout North America and South America. And I've watched this industry impact and change so rapidly. It has really been a fun journey. You look at the power walls and the caves that were ranging anywhere from 250,000 to $1 million and a half dollars, and now we have we can have that same experience on a $2,000 pair of glassware. And so it has changed very rapidly over the last 20 years. And watching that transformation's been a fantastic experience, like I mentioned, and it has impacted aerospace and defense in a number of very positive ways. It's definitely here to stay. It's definitely part of the future in aerospace and defense.
So, as you have been working for a long time in this industry, and this aerospace and XR is relatively new, so what, according to you, are like the AR applications or use cases that you think are here to stay and are also useful in the aerospace, particularly in the manufacturing space?
Well, I think in the manufacturing space, I think it's going to grow rapidly here in the next, 3 to 5 years. There's been some fantastic use cases and ROI metrics that have been created by a number of aerospace companies here in the States from a manufacturing perspective. There's a lot of really good information out there on that. I can think of one example is fastener placement. In the aerospace industry here in the States, it has grown very rapidly. The ability to gain useful employees or a multitude of employees to cover that demand has been very difficult. And so they have found themselves cross-training a lot of employees. So one day they may be working on a crew seat, and the next month they may be working on placing fasteners throughout a fuselage. So they have to cross-train rapidly. And so by building step-paced AR work instructions, the employee can step in without almost any training, place the glasses on his head or her head, and start placing fasteners in that environment. And some of the ROI metrics have been staggering there, 95% reduction in touch labor around those type of applications. And so, I think here in the States, you'll see that expanding rapidly. I know the formation of several new groups in some of these aerospace companies centered around the use of AR and XR. They have 5, 10, 15 folks in these groups now building these step-based work instructions for those type of applications.
So, as you mentioned, ROI metrics as well, that leads me to what do you think are the metrics that you have seen have been successful, especially when it comes to manufacturing and aircraft maintenance?
Well, aircraft maintenance historically has been very, I say boutique, but it's been, very hands-on. There's not been a lot of automation. So, I think there are a lot of brilliant use cases on the floor. The fastener location is one. Crew seats, are another one. I think that, where you have an employee doing multiple touches in multiple departments, it makes a tremendous amount of sense to have those step-based work instructions in place. I can't remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, so how am I going to remember how to build a crew seat that I haven't touched in 6 months? So, I think that those use cases, there's plenty of them in this space.
So, when we are talking about the benefits and all the good things about XR, I think it's also important for us to speak where it falls short. So, what areas or applications do you think of XR has haven't worked when it comes to aerospace industry?
I've seen a lot of really successful applications over the years, and I've seen some fail. Um, and though I think the ones that have really struggled is probably not the right use case, where you have someone that does that job every day and doesn't experience other parts of the facility or other manufacturing processes. It doesn't make sense to go through and build step-based work instructions for an environment like that. And I've seen some use cases where they've brought, AR to the shop floor, if you will, in an area like that. And, the workers can do it faster without AR because of their experience level. So I've seen, the importance of correctly choosing that use case where it's not a regular operation or it's a very difficult or challenging operation that very few people are involved in, and requires a significant level of detail. I think that those use cases are very, very successful. I think there's been a lot of use cases here in that area that have not had proper direction, misaligned with the actual application and they fail, or not having support from management as they've tried to deploy these on the shop floor, and there's been failures there as well. So, I think, if I were to sum it up, I would say, just having a solid use case where you have a very visible ROI at the end of that use case that makes all the difference in the world.
Right. So that brings us to when we are trying to introduce or utilize XR in aerospace, what do you think have been some of the challenges that we might have faced?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest challenges at the very beginning is having IT and security buy-in. A lot of these environments are very sensitive, and I think there's been a tremendous amount of opportunity that has been lost as a result of not having those key relationships with IT and security at the very beginning and bringing them to the table very early. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Those groups are always overworked. They typically don't have time because they're working on larger scale developments, and it has I think paused or not allowed the ability for some of those use cases to spawn and really prove out those ROIs. And so I would say that that's probably been one of the biggest challenges in the starting point. And then, having that support structure in place where you have from the worker through IT, having it mapped out, having all the right support and players in place before trying to go down that path. I think there's been a lot of failures as a result of that as well.
So what do you think of the device landscape?
Oh, I'm excited about it. Apple's coming out with their new device. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I think there's been a boom in the last couple of years from a device perspective. I run into devices all the time that I haven't seen before. And so it's been really quite exciting. And I think everybody wants something that looks like a pair of Ray-Ban glasses. And I think we're very rapidly moving that direction. And being involved in it from the early days with the very, very large, clunky, make your head all wobbly type devices to now where they're at. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm really excited to see how Apple impacts this environment from a device perspective, because I think it's going to require everybody to step up their game a little bit and move a little faster in the development. So I think it's fantastic. I want to see more devices.
So, when we are talking about the XR hardware, so what do you think is more needed in terms of development so that as we are talking today about aerospace and XR, so what do you think we need to do more in terms of hardware development to use the XR for aerospace?
From a hardware development perspective,
Yes.
um, I think they need to. I think first of all, it's very important on the manufacturing side of things to have a very clear field of view. I know with some of the devices that have been out there in the past, that field of view is obstructed quite a bit, and it limits its abilities on the shop floor. From a safety standpoint. I think that the devices that have tethers and battery pucks, that creates another potential issue for the shop floor from a safety hazard. So I think from a device perspective, the closer we can get to a single, a nice set of almost like sunglass type hardware, I think if we can get to that point, I think the usage in that manufacturing space is going to expand rapidly.
So let's step back a bit. So we were talking about the challenges when we are trying to introduce and utilize XR in aerospace. So we talked about the challenges, but how do you think those challenges can be tackled?
Start early with IT and security. They're more and more I'm starting to see when we are at events that IT and security team members are coming to these XR events now. The value of the return on the investment and the value that they're seeing on the shop floor is starting to resonate in those groups. And so we're starting to see more and more of those IT and security folks stepping to the table to assist teams in bringing these solutions to the shop floor. So I think that, from my perspective, if you start with those teams, I think you're going to have a smoother ride. And I think you're going to be able to accelerate those opportunities to the shop floor quicker. I think it's now not as important for device selection where it has been in the past. Everybody has been afraid to choose a device because what happens if that device company goes out of business? I think with the development of WebXR and the browser-based solutions that are out there that take away that thin client and the licensing and app side of things and developing to a device, I think is going to help accelerate things rapidly. So now I can try various devices at my leisure and decide which device best suits my application on the shop floor.
So when it comes to scaling the XR in this industry, what do you think is needed to scale XR in the aerospace industry?
Again, I start with the IT and security support right at the very beginning. That buy-in needs to happen very early. I think we need to see more C-suite involvement and upper management involvement in a lot of this and these things moving forward. I think we get traction to a point, but if it's not directly tied to some metric from a C-suite perspective, I think it doesn't gain the adoption rapidly. as rapidly as it should. And then I think from a device standpoint, like we touched on, I think the devices need to continue to get smaller, easier to use, lighter, which, as you can tell from your experience, that's happening. Every couple of months, it seems like there's a new modification or a new device or a smaller device. And then I think, again, come back to the use of WebXR. I think traditional methods of building applications and doing single licensing per user type environments has restricted a lot of the potential growth from that perspective. With the introduction of WebXR and the elimination of that thin client on the devices, I think it allows more people to try an application or play with different solutions out there, regardless of device. And I think that's going to help accelerate things rapidly in the next 12 to 18 months.
So, as we are talking about scaling the XR in the aerospace industry, what technology or development do you think it's critical for achieving that amount of scale?
There's so many variables there. Cost has come down considerably on everything, on devices. There are some absolutely brilliant people from a software perspective working in this space. I think that, I think budgets are starting to open up in this environment a little bit more, where we're getting away from the innovation departments and now starting to bring this into the engineering, the prototyping in the departments that need this type of application a little more frequently now. And so I think if that continues, I think things will scale very rapidly at that point, getting it into the hands of the folks that know that this makes an impact.
According to you, like, do you know any groundbreaking projects that you see are on the horizon and they hold the potential to redefine the whole aerospace industry?
Well, there's a number that I can think of. I know with some outside of manufacturing, I know the cockpit design using XR and AR has been a huge push here in the States. I know there's been a number of brilliant companies that have popped up. The one that I can think of right offhand is out of Orlando, a company called Red Six that's doing AR fighter pilot training using their existing helmets that they have, for those type of applications. It excites me because I see it starting to go and reach out, not just manufacturing, but a number of different areas. And so I think there's going to be a lot of really exciting developments in the next 12 to 18 months.
So, before we move on to the last part of the podcast, do you think we missed anything that needs to be discussed or addressed when it comes to this industry?
No, I think, I think to gain adoption in this space, you have to have all of the right buy-ins from the beginning. It is a sensitive environment, and I just would strongly encourage folks to start with the IT and security teams, and make them your best friend. I mean, if you can do that, selling the rest of the organization becomes, I think, a lot easier. And so I think that from a challenge standpoint, that's always been my biggest hurdle. And so I think that if we can get to that point where we have those two buy-ins, I think things run way smoother.
So, yeah, lastly, what future innovations you see in the intersection of XR?
Innovation that I'm really following closely, I think, is the pass-through. You've had traditional AR glasses like the HoloLens, and then you've had this traditional VR glass like the Oculus or the Meta Quest, and now you have these hybrids where you have a pass-through using the cameras. And I just picked up one here recently and have been playing with it, and it's very intriguing. I don't see the delay that I was expecting from the cameras, and I'm starting to see some very, very strong potential for some great use cases. I'm curious to see if it's ever going to be worked or used on the shop floor because of that. I don't have my full field of view, but the concept of being able to have an AR VR type glass and only have to buy one intrigues me. I think there's going to be a lot of push towards that, and really making that a much more user friendly and a much broader field of view as well in the future. So that really excites me.
So, all right, I think it's time to wrap up. And so, again, thank you for taking your time and sharing your experience, your perspectives on this topic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you
Yeah,
for asking me to join.
namaskaram.